I thank the gentleman. We now go to the ranking member of the full committee, the gentleman from Maryland, for 5 minutes.
Professor Dilo, you said that in China, the courts are supposed to decide according to party policy as well as the law, which is kind of amusing. I just finished reading Alexei Navalny's book, Patriot, where he said in Russia they talk about telephone justice to describe either the literal or metaphorical coercion that the government plays in the decision of particular cases. I'm wondering, is this the same thing happening in academia in China, where scholars and deans are intimidated or coerced into deciding things according to official government edict? I ask, of course, because we're in a situation now where Donald Trump is trying to coerce colleges and universities, including Harvard, to accept his dictates with respect to student admissions, faculty hiring, and curricular and academic content. And I'm wondering if that's something you find in China too.
The short answer is yes. Before turning that, I want to stress that in many cases in Chinese courts, and many Chinese judges and lawyers admirably apply the law fairly and play their roles the way one would hope they would play them, and sometimes do so against the kinds of pressures that have been long present in China and that seem increasingly present in the United States. I've been dealing with Chinese counterparts in academia, in law, political science, and other fields for many years. There have always been restrictions. The restrictions have gotten tighter. The ability to publish one's work, to express one's views, are definitely under pressure. The reach of the party and state into universities have shrunk what was once more capacious academic space. There have also been restrictions on Chinese scholars coming to the US, which has been a place where they are able to express ideas more freely and gather information. So all of those pressures are there. And as with courts, so this gets a little closer and more personal, what we're feeling now on American university campuses resonates in uncomfortable ways with what I've seen in China. That is the pressure, not only the concern about whether you will harm your university by saying certain things, or the concern about the loss of the resources necessary to do research are real, as well as the interventions in what we hire and what we teach.
And are there attempts to impose government edicts and dictates on lawyers and on law firms?
In the United States or in China?
In China.
In China. Yes, there are always restrictions on law firms and lawyers. Those who have represented dissidents or targets of repressive policies have faced threats to their law licenses. Chinese courts do have a significant discretion not to take cases that people might bring that are politically disfavored. So while this is not Soviet-style justice, and many cases are handled in perfectly ordinary ways, the more politically sensitive the case, the more party and state officials take interest in the case, the less likely it is to get to court or to be handled fairly once there.
I see. So I had the impression that there was very little judicial independence, but you're saying that in a lot of cases in China, the courts operate relatively free from direct governmental coercion or control.
It depends on the type of case, the type of court, and the type of parties, but the kinds of things that your question points to, the politically sensitive areas, things which would be deemed adverse to the interests or preferences, are ones where that is.
So we could very easily in America slide into that kind of system where the vast majority of contract tort property disputes are handled without any direct political interference, but when it comes to constitutional cases, the interpretation of executive powers or legislative powers, there could be much more political interference.
That kind of bifurcation is a hallmark of systems which have only made limited progress toward rule of law, rule by law, or that have backslid from robust democratic rule of law. It's one of the things that can be quite insidious. Ernst Frankl, a German scholar from many years ago, described the idea of a dual system, a dual state, where some cases are channeled through the ordinary legal process with fair process, and other cases, politically sensitive ones, face a very different regime wherein the preferences of those in power determine the outcome.
Can you explain the doctrine of true conflict, where American courts will sometimes not impose a U.S. law against a foreign entity if that entity's country has a law that's in true conflict with our laws?
Sure, a true conflict situation is where a party is subject to the laws of two countries, and that often happens with entities or individuals who work in China and here, some border straddling activity. A true conflict is where you cannot comply with one state's laws without violating another. So to take one example from US litigation, the vitamin C antitrust litigation, where the claim was that Chinese law required price collusion, and US antitrust laws, of course, prohibited it. We're seeing more of this, and I think one of the areas where it may become quite serious is in China's anti-foreign sanctions law, where they will prohibit companies subject to Chinese jurisdiction from complying with US sanctions, whereas those companies are obliged to comply with US sanctions. Courts are going to have to face this, and they have to decide what to do. And the ordinary international legal principles rooted ultimately in comity are to decide which state has the stronger interest and to apply its law, or to refuse to apply foreign law that is repugnant to the public policy of the host jurisdiction, the forum jurisdiction.
Thank you. Yield back, Mr. Chair.
I thank the gentleman. We now go to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Klein, for 5 minutes.
Thank the chairman. I want to thank our witnesses for being here. As was stated, foreign entities invest substantial sums in litigation financing, potentially influencing court decisions to align with their interests. There's no